We got Frank Close joining us here on the Boardwalk Honda hotline here on 97.3 ESPN. You can check out his work at 973ESPN.com. He also does the Phillies mailbag each and every week, and he's our Phillies beat writer for the website. Frank, how you doing on this Wednesday?
I'm great, Josh. How are you?
Frank, I'd be doing a little bit better if Jake Arrieta would actually play like a veteran and not like a frazzled young kid. I don't get this guy. I mean, I'm not trying to start the day on a negative note, but, you know, I'm watching this guy, and all I can hear him is in the back of my head that whole accountability and how moody he was after the Giants game. But yet, this is the guy who's given up a home run in 5 straight starts. He looked like a guy who was lost, dazed, and confused last night. You know, for a guy who screams and complains about accountability just a few weeks ago, where's the accountability for him, Frank?
Yeah, this is a really tough one. I mean, if you look at what's happened to him on the mound, he actually is. I saw a stat yesterday. He's allowed more unearned runs since any Phillies pitcher since Paul Byrd in 1999 for the whole season. So even last night, he only allowed 3 earned runs, and it seems like the defense behind him is really letting him down. And I think that there's a point where it seems to have frazzled him. And you know what? Maybe it's frazzled the infielders because they feel like they have to be too perfect when he's on the mound.
You know, it's interesting because you mentioned the players feeling like they have to be perfect. At what point does this team, this Phillies team, have to know that maybe they can't rely on this guy to be what they thought he was going to be?
Well, I'm not ready to say that yet, that he's not being what they wanted him to be. He's still got a pretty low ERA. He's, like I said, the statistics are very much skewed. I mean, no pitcher in the last 20 years has had that kind of barrage of unearned runs that Arrieta has had so far. So I think I think in some respects we need to relax a little bit. Certainly it's kind of unnerving when he makes those comments and then his 4 starts right after it all appear to be mediocre. I mean, I'm not saying by any means he's pitched well, but you know, it seems like this is one of those things where they started down a slippery slope and it keeps building momentum every time.
With Arrieta's struggles and Vince Velasquez being basically a Jekyll and Hyde pitcher, does this emphasize the need for the Phillies to go out and get another veteran pitcher for this rotation if they're serious about a playoff run?
You know, I think the rotation's fine. I still think, as we've often said on the air here, that they could use a left-handed starter. But besides that, I'm not really looking at this Phillies rotation and thinking that they desperately need to shake it up. I mean, they're going to get Jared Eichhoff back maybe sometime. It sounds like he's moving along. I mean, we said that before, and he had a setback. But I think there is room to add a lefty. I think they will try to find a lefty. Gabe Kapler made some comments yesterday that the Phillies were going to be looking under every rock to try to find some reinforcements, whether that be a bullpen arm, whether it be a veteran bat for the middle of the lineup, or maybe even a starting rotation pitcher. So I think the Phillies will be active, but a lot of it will depend on kind of how they come out of this stretch. You know, they won 4 series in a row. Now they've lost 4 games in a row, right? So they really could use this win 3 games in a row. They could really use this win tonight so they don't make it 4 games in a row, and really show that they do belong in the conversation, because I think if they play themselves out of the conversation, they're not going to be looking at adding any pieces. So other than maybe some minor pieces, I think if you get to the point where maybe we're 2 weeks from now, you're kind of into July a little bit, the Phillies are still hanging around, and I think they might be willing to go the extra mile. But if you think about it, we talked before about how this stretch of games were going to be really indicative of the Phillies, and having won those 4 series really does mean a lot. And just because they struggled against the Yankees so far, it doesn't necessarily mean that that they kind of fell completely off the way towards a playoff spot. So I think a lot matters how they do in the National Series and how next week goes, because then they start playing some lesser teams that they should beat up on, and You get through the tough stretch. I think they'll be listening, and I wouldn't rule it out either. So while I don't think they're in desperate need of a starter, I think they really could use a lefty starter. But that doesn't mean too that if the right opportunity falls on their lap, they're not going to just take it.
See, for me, Frank, I look at a guy like a Cole Hamels, and you know me, I've been saying this for like 2 months now. You bring Cole Hamels in, and maybe you kick a guy like Velasquez to the bullpen, and Velasquez can be, for this team in 2018, kind of what Brett Myers was in 2007, a guy who brings some stability to the bullpen because you only can have so many guys as starting pitchers.
Well, it's funny. I know you had yesterday off, but one thing I've kind of reconsidered that. I kind of thought at one point that Velasquez could be the guy, but watching how he started out against the Yankees, he was kind of overthrowing. He was kind of rattled. He was kind of nervous, and it made me take a little step back and say, if this guy comes into high leverage situations at the end of the game and he only has 3 outs to get, is he going to be this rattled? Is he going to be this? He was overthrowing big time, and I think I even heard a couple commentators remark that, like, man, it's amazing he got through 6 innings because in the beginning he was just all over the place. So will he be all over the place if he comes into a high leverage situation at the end? I think that's something that that might be an area of concern. I don't think there's, and of course you can't really rule it out until he actually goes and tries it. But I was watching him on Monday thinking, maybe he's not the best choice for the back end of the bullpen.
So then what is Velasquez's future? Is his future really as a starting pitcher, or is he just a guy going through growing pains and we just gotta let shall I call it, the process play out?
Yeah, this is a really hard one. The Phillies for 2017 tried to figure out what he was. 2018, the plan was to figure out what he is, and it's really, really hard to say. And I think if you're a team like the Phillies, you recognize that you have somebody with some talent. And I think what might end up happening, now you mentioned bringing in a lefty like Cole Hamels, what might end up happening is a guy like Velasquez is the guy that goes out in the trade. Because another team might have the opportunity that the Phillies will soon no longer have, which is the opportunity to let him kind of play himself out. If you're a contender, you don't have the time to sit and wait around and see if a guy is ever going to develop into his potential. But if you're not a contender, like if you're the Texas Rangers, for example, if they are making a trade with the Rangers have some time to spare. They can just put him into the rotation for the rest of the year and say, okay, go do your thing, and then at the end see what the body of work said. So that might be what happens to somebody like Velasquez, because when you're a contender, you don't have time to wait around anymore.
That's an interesting thought. How appealing do you think a guy like Velasquez is to teams around baseball? How do you think that, because we know how we view him in this market, but do you think other teams view him as a guy who is a project, a guy who maybe is, maybe a season or 2 away? How do you think other teams possibly view him?
There's always guys out there. If we think back, remember someone like AJ Burnett, who was always kind of thought of as a hot young starter, and it actually kind of took him going to Pittsburgh to sort of revitalize his career the way he did. And a lot of them actually have come through Pittsburgh because they've had some really good coaches, and Jim Benedict over the years, and Ray Searage. But there's always players like that some of those pitching guru types are like salivating over, saying, "Oh man, if I could get my hands on him, I really think I can make a difference in his game." And I think there's always going to be a Pittsburgh Pirates. There's always going to be a Kansas City Royals. There's always going to be teams like that need to take those chances if they're going to play themselves into contention. And for those years that the Pirates are really good, a lot of that was built on pitching like that. I mean, Jay Happ is a tremendous veteran starting pitcher right now, but he wasn't that way until somebody at Pittsburgh really got him going on the right track. So, there could be the time where some of the Phillies young players that frustrate us at times, like Maikel Franco and Vince Velasquez, they end up on these teams and they really get them going. And good for them if that works out. But it's just kind of the part of the price of doing business is that, sometimes your guys really figure it out when they go somewhere else. And and it could be that Velasquez and Franco end up making a difference for another team someday, and that's just the way it goes sometimes.
You mentioned that's the way how it goes sometimes. So how much of that do you believe when it comes to development, whether it's for a Velasquez, a Franco, or any of these guys? You know, we know a guy like, for example, before Paul Bird got to Philadelphia, you know, he was kind of a nobody, right? You know, before some of these guys get to some of these teams, they're nobodies. You know, how much of that is the coaching staff in Philadelphia? How much of that is the development of the organization versus how much of that is the guy just needing a fresh start?
You even think back to our own educations, right? I mean, we probably had teachers in high school that really clicked with us, and then we had others that we just weren't on the same page. And those teachers might have done a really good job with some of our classmates, right? So, you know, sometimes it's just a matter of personality, where it's not that your coaches are poor. It's just that, you know, maybe individuals don't necessarily click with them. And there's people out there that I've worked with in the past that I respect for what they do, but I didn't necessarily think I could work well with them. So sometimes it's just a matter of personality. It's not somebody is good, not somebody is not good. But yeah, it's funny. We have two Paul Bird mentions in one conversation. Who saw that coming, huh? But yeah, there are plenty of instances where, you know, somebody finds the right coach that they just click with, and then they're off and running. And sometimes it takes years, as Paul Bird did and Jay Happ did, and just to keep naming some ex-Phillies.
Frank Close joining us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline here on 97.3 ESPN, here on Middays with Q. Josh Hennig filling in for Rich Q on a Wednesday. Frank, you know, you mentioned personalities. Obviously, one of the biggest lightning rods right now at the Phillies is still Gabe Kapler. And, you know, I'm getting to the point, Frank, where I'm contending that I don't know if I can blame Kapler as much as everybody else is. I don't know if, I mean, you know, Kapler's not the guy throwing the pitch that gets hit for a home run. You know, Kapler's not the guy who's throwing, you know, 5-6 straight fastballs like Dominguez was when he should have thrown a slider on Sunday night. I can't blame Kapler for the performance of the guys on the field, like he is responsible for everything. Am I crazy for thinking that, or is Kapler more culpable than I realize?
No, I tend to agree with you. Now, did you think for a second that if he had Kenley Jansen in his bullpen, or he had Craig Kimbrell in his bullpen, he just wouldn't throw him out there in the ninth inning every single day? I mean, really, do you think he would do anything but that if he had those guys? So, I mean, I think right now he's trying to navigate through the guys he's got. And if you're Gabe Kapler, right, and you're going to have these post-game conferences, and you're going to ask about him using Adam Morgan here or there, he's not going to get up on that podium and say, hey, listen, all my guys suck, so I had to just throw somebody out there, right? You know, I mean, he's going to say, look, I've got confidence in my guys, and I think they can pitch anywhere I put them. And meanwhile, you know, he's not going to project a negative image about anybody. I mean, it could be internally he's in an office with Matt Klentak saying, dude, you got to get me a left-handed reliever. You know, that we're not going to see that publicly, and I can understand why people hear those comments and get frustrated. But because I think they are really indeed missing that sort of lockdown bullpen type, and until they have it, until they have their Craig Kimbrell, until they have their Kenley Jansen, what's he going to do? So I mean, I think that, you know, the Phillies rightfully thought they had more to work with this year. Nobody knew Hector Neris would kind of fall off the planet the way he did. You know, going from saving 20 games to end the season to we can't put you into a mop-up role because you're just going to give up more runs. You know, that piece was working the way it did last year. Pat Neshek of 2017. I mean, they signed him to be that veteran guy, and he hasn't been able to get on the field. You know, you really can't discount the difference just those two arms alone makes to the whole bullpen picture. If he had those guys and could use them, then all of a sudden Edubray Ramos is having a tremendous year. Hopefully he's back off the DL soon. He's pitching the way he is in the seventh inning. You're feeling really good, especially when you get Dominguez into the mix, and hopefully you're not overusing him like you were as of late. And I think they realize that now, so they're kind of scaling back a little bit. But you know, it's just amazing how just two arms going awry can make such a difference in the bullpen, or two really stepping up and performing well can make a difference in the bullpen. And until he's got the the guys that he can confidently put in and not worry about it to shut the door, this is what you're going to see, and this is the image he's going to project.
He is Frank Close. Give him a follow on Twitter at Frank Close for all your Phillies coverage throughout the year. Of course, check out all of his work at 97.3ESPN.com. His Phillies mailbag. You can hear that conversation every Tuesday on the Sports Bash at 3:30. And Frank, as all guests, join us on the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Frank, appreciate the time on a Wednesday.
Always enjoy it, Josh. Thank you.